Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our expert panel, The Agentic Shift, Designing AI That Can Reason, Plan, and Act. Brought to you by our friends at Precisely, Revefi, Google Cloud, AtScale, Rhino Federated Computing, Udemy Business, and SAP. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI ecosystem for enterprise leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from around the world to explore a pivotal shift: AI systems that can not only respond, but also take initiative. This webinar unpacks what it means to build and deploy agentic AI models that possess goal-directed reasoning, dynamic planning capabilities, and the ability to autonomously execute tasks across complex workflows. We'll explore architectural and governance considerations for enterprise adoption, including how to integrate agentic systems into existing data ecosystems, ensure transparency and control, and maintain human-in-the-loop oversight. We're honored to hear from a distinguished panel of experts today. Adrish Sannyasi, VP Customer Solutions and Delivery at Rhino Federated Computing; Girish Bhat, SVP at Revefi; Antonio Cotroneo, Director of Product Marketing at Precisely; Dave Mariani, Co-founder and CTO at AtScale; and Shan, Head of Product BigQuery Advanced Analytics at Google Cloud. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile, include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. We'll be addressing your questions throughout the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like the panel to address. If you're wondering where your organization stands compared to others on your AI journey, check out the poll questions in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to prepare your organizations for a future of agentic AI, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar from our sponsors. I'm excited to welcome our panelists to the stage. Thanks for joining us. And we'll start with some quick intros to each of you. So I'll start with the order that you guys will hear on my screen. So we'll kick things off with Dave. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and your firm.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Mariani. I'm the CTO and co-founder of AtScale. AtScale delivers a universal semantic layer. So my connection to all this is semantics are really important for providing context for AI, especially headless agents and the like, and conversational AI. And a semantic layer brings meaning and basically makes it so that these models and these LLMs that have been generally trained on the general internet can understand enterprise data and make that connection. So glad to be here.
Welcome, Dave. Girish?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Brian. And I'm Girish with Revefi. Revefi, we offer an autonomous AI agent for data management that solves use cases related to data engineering, cost optimization, performance optimization, and data observability. We have customers like AMD, Stanley Black & Decker, Verisk that use it at massive scale and realize significant cost benefits up to 70% in some cases and more. For me personally, I feel that data management ecosystem is a tad bit behind when it comes to experimenting, adopting, and even deploying ROI-based AI solutions in the marketplace. So I think our entire ecosystem, we need to take a very pragmatic and perhaps an accelerated viewpoint of how to adapt AI and agentic AI to benefit our customers. That's my opinion, and I absolutely agree with Dave. Semantic layer and data around that has become critical thanks to not only pre-AI, but definitely in the world of AI. Looking forward to this discussion, gentlemen.
Excellent. Welcome again, Girish. Shan?
Brian, thank you for giving the opportunity, and excited to have spend the next hour or so with all the panelists here in the audience and learn from each of you. So I'm Shan. I lead the product management team for BigQuery. BigQuery, for those of you that are not familiar, is the cloud data warehouse from Google Cloud. It's a serverless, infinitely scalable planet scale data warehouse. And over the last few years, my team has been at the forefront of enabling, both internal and external agentic AI use cases. I and my team work with, the core Gemini team to bring Gemini models to BigQuery, work with internal teams that are building things like data science agent and data engineering agent. I also work with customers. So sort of while my team is not necessarily building AI agents themselves, we have a first row seat to what is happening in the broader ecosystem from a inside out viewpoint, right, from a platform out viewpoint. So excited to be here and learn from all of you and share maybe things that we've seen along the way.
Thanks, Shan. Antonio?
Awesome. Yes, as Brian mentioned, Antonio Cotroneo, thank you so much for having us today. Director of Product Marketing here at Precisely. If you are unaware of who Precisely is, we focus on the data management side, so getting your data ready for AI initiatives, or in this case, for being able to support an agentic initiative that you may have at the organization. So yes, from our perspective, it's really about that data foundation that an organization has, and really being able to close what we refer to as a data integrity gap within agentic workflows. So being able to unify your data, enrich it with real world context, or from metadata context, business context, that's going to help these agents make better decisions and act properly and within the guardrails of an organization. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation today. So thank you for having us.
Excellent. Adrish?
Yeah, I am Adrish Sannyasi at Rhino Federated Computing Platform. We build a federated computing platform that lets organization train and deploy private AI models across distributed data without any need for data centralization. We operate across 100 plus active data and compute nodes across different clouds, all multi-clouds, on-prem data centers, implementing secure code execution environments across multiple industries like healthcare, life sciences, financial services, and public sectors, where regulations and compliance is really important. In the agentic AI context, what we are focused on is a multi-cloud data and AI infrastructure layer that agents need to operate. First, we launched Rhino MCP server that provides secure access to enterprise data to agents, providing all the data governance primitives like auditability, role-based access control, privacy control, and so on. And the second, we, as a part of our routine federated learning, we already have a very centralized orchestration layer that we're using to define goals, define workflows that are core to agentic deployment. Third is we provide a sandboxed compute execution environment that can be controlled centrally, but it can be executed in a distributed fashion within the data custodian's firewall.
Excellent. Thanks for the intros, and certainly a very well-qualified expert panel today and lots of different perspectives. So looking forward to a great discussion. I'll kick things off with our first question. So agentic AI these days is of course the latest buzzword, but really to help our audience understand what that truly means, especially in the enterprise context, I just want to break that down. When we talk about agentic AI, what exactly are we referring to, and how do you distinguish between systems that are truly agentic, meaning that they drive off of goal-directed agents, versus more traditional types of AI assistants or LLM tools that are not necessarily agentic in nature? So Girish, why don't you start with that?
Sure. I'll start with what I think most people would agree, at least controversial way of getting started. We look at agentic AI as an approach to building a solution, in this case, an AI solution that leverages one or more what people would call a software entity that may be completely called an AI agent or partially classified as an AI agent. However, if you take a step back, I think, Brian, you prefaced the question, it was in your question itself. We look at agentic AI as systems that are goal directed, that is, execute on a particular goal over time and may or may not have reasoning capability depending on the agent. And it takes a step of actions to pursue and achieve that outcome to the extent possible. So one simplest way is a traditional AI tool or a chatbot. You ask a question, it responds, whereas an agent gets things done. In the context of what we do, I won't pick my colleague from Google BigQuery. I'll pick the Snowflake example in our case. If you ask an LLM-based assistant, whether it's Gemini or anything, or Snowflake Cortex for that matter, why your Snowflake cost spiked this week, it'll give a decent answer. It'll say, well, okay, we had so many users log in and that sort of thing. That's almost a one-shot like approach. Whereas an agent, if implemented properly, will go say, well, we had so many new workloads or slots, so many users, and these are the Looker queries or maybe the Cortex queries that are running. And it'll even come back and suggest to you how to reduce the spend if that's the goal of the thing. So I look at agents as executing towards an outcome as opposed to one shot or a transactional response.
Yeah, good synopsis. Shan?
Yeah, I'll build on what Girish was saying. I think I agree with what he laid out as a foundation. I think for me, like the way I think about agentic systems is, until now we had, one type of software, right? Which is you wrote prescriptive instructions to a machine on how to operate, and the machine operated. Right? I think agentic AI sort of brings a shift in how software operates, where the software, has a reasoning loop, which allows it to reason about things, act, learn, and improve itself. I think that is the fundamental difference between the software that the world has built over the last, 70, 80 years, depending on when you start the clock for software, and what agents bring it, right? Which is, I think, building on what Girish was saying, it's really, systems that can, reason, act, learn, coordinate with other systems towards an outcome. Now, one could argue that it was possible to build such software even before agents come to the forefront, right? You could go build rule-based systems. I think the critical aspect that distinguishes traditional software from agents is the fact that you have a reasoning loop built in, a non-deterministic reasoning loop, which can learn from the environment, build new skills, and iterate on a problem, as opposed to rule-based systems. Now, that's what agents are. And now we throw around the term agentic AI, right? So agentic AI to me is similar to software engineering, what software engineering meant in maybe 5 years back, right? Which is, it refers to the discipline of developing agents. It refers to the DevOps practices that you need to have to deploy and manage agents. It encompasses all the governance, security aspects that come into play. So that's what agentic AI to me. Agentic AI is the entirety of the ecosystem to create, deploy, manage agents, autonomous agents. That's how I would frame it.
Great points, Antonio.
So over the last couple of years, we've experienced obviously this pretty drastic and accelerated, AI within the marketplace. So I think over the last few years, it's been that sort of generative experience, which is quite reactive, right? I'm talking to ChatGPT or to Claude, or pick your LLM of choice, and I'm bringing some sort of question or some prompt that I want the LLM to be able to provide some sort of response that I'll use for a decision or to create something new that I'm going to use in a project. Whereas now we're turning towards more of something's going to act on my behalf, and is going to need to do that within some set of guardrails that myself, my organization, whatever those business parameters are that we can agree upon. And so from an agentic AI perspective, what that really means to us is this is something that is going to interpret signals from the business typically across systems, and is going to be able to make some sort of decision and act on that decision across some kind of multi-step or complex process that's going to take some amount of time. That could be updating specific records, escalating cases, and then acting upon that escalation, enforcing some sort of policy. Whatever that might be within your business, it's going to be completely different across industries. So I think for us, what that brings up from a data management perspective is that yes, this is going to be able to accelerate the work, but it's also going to be able to accelerate a lot of the consequences of not having the data in place to perform the agentic work as it was intended to be performed. So I think that's the big shift that we're seeing. I don't know how long we've all heard the sort of garbage in, garbage out component of our work, but this takes that same piece and then puts it on an accelerated track that I think what we all sort of deal with the fallout of.
Absolutely, Adrish.
Oh yeah, I'll give some. I agree with all the speaker that said so far. It's autonomous system that helps accomplish a goal. I'll give you a concrete example that we have seen recently in a customer implementation. We have a data analyst in a research organization who wants to query across multiple data sources and do something. So LLM way of doing that could be, give me summarization of all the patients across my network. So that could be a one prompt approach. So instead of that, what we're doing in the agentic space is to say, find me the optimal cohort for this clinical trial studies by using my network and give me the recommendations on the inclusion exclusion criteria. So that's kind of a goal that person wants to achieve in order to create a good criteria for finding the optimal cohort. So in that scenario, it's not just a one step. It has multiple steps. You have to discover the data. It needs to run data quality checks. It needs to run various simulations of the cohort and give recommendations on what the criteria would be that will help find the right patient numbers for this clinical trial. So that's an example of how you can convert instead of having a one-step LLM approach to an agentic approach where there is an intermediate steps of analysis, and that analysis steps drives the next steps of what iterations, and then ultimately users having a results in a much more faster than what they could do just using this in a manual approach. So that's a concrete examples I would say. I would also want to say that there's a confusion on what the predefined workflow versus agent means. A lot of cases people say, I'm running an ETL, that's like an agent. It's actually not an agent in my view. That may be a background job. It's a predefined workflow. You're running an ETL, it has an input, it's an output. Then it can be used as a part of a tool in an agent where agent runs this to accelerate some of the decision making, but you need that kind of little bit of a layer of iterations, not just call everything agent, differentiate between workflows versus what the agent really is.
Yeah, very good point. I think it gets to the distinction of agent as a marketing term versus agent as a technical framework for understanding what a system actually does. Jake, what are your thoughts there?
Well, so enough has been said, I think, but what I really heard, I think is really good is that, we're talking about systems that not just generate outputs, but pursue goals. And I think that's really important. And it's not about generating queries. It's about reasoning on the results of those queries. And so my example, I guess what got me to understand the difference was when I first did a demo with Claude on our MCP server, I went and asked a very BI-like question. I said, show me sales by product for France. Now, what would happen if I did that in a BI tool? You get a single cell back that would show you the sales number for what I asked for by product in a grid, and that's what you would get. But what Claude did is it went much further than that. It gave me the grid by sales by product for France, but it also said, did you know that your top selling product is in this market, and did you know that this other product the premium color is silver, and then it prompted me to ask for more. And so what I learned is that rather than sort of asking very specific questions, it's better to to ask these LLMs open-ended questions, like, tell me something about sales in France. And when you do that, all of a sudden, the LLM itself generates its queries, looks at the results of those queries, and then asks more queries. So it really highlighted to me how these agentic systems are creative and they're creative and they do their own reasoning. And that's good. But ultimately, you want them to reason on the questions they ask, but you don't want them to reason or try to figure out what's the right data and how to calculate that data. And so that's where meaning and semantics come in, is that you want to make sure that the queries that come back are deterministic, but you want the chatbot or the agent system to be creative and to be probabilistic, because that's where it's going to actually do real work and figure out stuff that would have taken humans a very long time to figure out on their own.
Yeah, great points all around. And one of the other terms that we hear a lot is human in the loop. So I want to address that one and specifically in the context of agents. So it's very easy to say, oh, with AI, we can make it more reliable, we can make it safe. If we just have a human in the loop, that solves all of our problems. But when we start talking about agentic AI, we want the agents to be able to reason on their own, to be able to plan on their own, to be able to act on their own across various different workflows, and that is a lot of the value that they bring. And so how does that change the way that we think about humans in the loop, and what does the role of a human in the loop look like when you have these agents spread across an enterprise and you need to oversee them in a way that is responsible? So Shan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. I think there are multiple aspects to that, right? But just sort of reacting to the human in the loop term itself, I think that's a great starting point for the industry as a whole, right? So for the first wave of agents that are coming to the market, I think human in the loop is the right architecture. It allows us to establish a foundation in terms of trust. Make sure the systems that is being built can solve, business problems, can lead to the right outcomes in a managed manner. But I think what we are going to very quickly realize is that approach doesn't scale, right? Because the promise of agentic AI is it's going to increase 10x the productivity of everyone in an organization, increase the output that an organization is able to deliver, which means that very quickly your agents the growth in agents is going to outpace the ability of humans to be able to be in the loop and control agents. So I think what we are going to see is very quickly we'll have to evolve into a model. Maybe another way to think about this is human on the loop, where we have systems and practices where there are certain classes of decisions, actions that the agent is able to autonomously execute. Maybe there is an audit mechanism and a governance mechanism to be able to analyze overall success rate. And then there's going to be a subset of problems where you need real human in the loop type of systems where the human is reviewing an action and approving it. But maybe another way to think about this is sort of I go back to our own experiences, right? Humans are, humans because we have probabilistic and non-deterministic, abilities where you're able to learn from the environment and take actions. But there are certain situations where you want a checklist and you want to follow the checklist, right? I think many of us have read this checklist manifesto book, which has a number of, very good statistics around how the use of a checklist increases the survival rate of patients in a surgery, in a surgery or things like that, or how airline pilots, in spite of their hours and years of training, follow a checklist during emergency operations, right? So I think we are going to see a similar pattern evolve, where there's a class of problems where you want to leverage the unique ability that agentic AI is bringing in, which is the non-determinism and ability to learn from the environment and adapt, which is what makes them truly unique compared to the rule-based systems. You don't want to curtail all of that with a human in the loop, which architecture which becomes the bottleneck. But there are going to be subset of cases where you want the agent to follow a checklist, and one of the steps in the checklist is a human reviewing and approving it. I think that's how I see the human in the loop model evolving. But would love to hear other perspectives on that.
Yeah, it's a great framework. Antonio?
I think with I totally agree with what Shan was talking about. I think the big piece is about repositioning where the human might be in the loop if it's more from a positional perspective. But like if we're taking a lot of what we're seeing right now in the industry is more semi-autonomous agents that are need some sort of transactional approval to go off and make some sort of decision or act on something. And so I think that's going to sort of begin to shift to something that's more human defined guardrails. So like a policy definition. We've seen this for a long time within the data governance space, obviously around the ways that, we're able to govern the data that we use and understand how that data should be used, and then implementing that throughout the organization. I think we're going to see a very similar thing from an AI governance sort of program and initiative, where the human in the loop in this case is the human that's going to be defining the guardrails of the agentic system, and then what it's going to be doing is then doing some sort of real-time intervention. So if there's some sort of oversight that needs to happen, if an agent crosses some sort of risk threshold that the organization has set, then maybe that's where the human comes in to intervene. They're monitoring maybe trust scores in that case, or some sort of confidence threshold, or maybe if there was an action that was made, but the transparency or the explainability or the auditability of that action isn't up to snuff, then perhaps that's a moment in time when the human needs to intervene into some sort of action, and that intervention is sort of the exception handling, right? Maybe the agent's able to handle 80 to 90% of the routine work, but then the human is going to focus on those edge cases. Maybe there's some sort of ethical ambiguity that's in place, and so it's kind of responsible oversight and tied more to AI governance programs as those continue to mature and are more embedded into the data culture within an organization.
Yeah, great points, Antonio. Adrish?
Yeah, the way we looking at it is the first of all, I think Antonio already mentioned there's a policy definitions. We implemented a policy layer so that basic stuff and how people use the data, what type of privilege they have, what rows, what columns they can use, etc. So those are defined very concretely, and this is one of the things that will become important in this agentic space. Is a data model will become an important skill. Data modeling, schema management, API design. If you document things properly, then it will be easy for agent to operate safely. So that's one of the very critical piece here that we implemented in our system. Second thing I'll say is we have a product called Data Harmonization Engine, where we implemented confidence, risk-oriented human in the loop. So in some cases, the model is very confident on the prediction, so it just go ahead and does whatever it's supposed to do. In other cases, it creates a list for a human to review, but list is very small. It's not like every record that they have to review. And lastly, I would say that we implemented significant investment. We did significant investment in observability, evaluation of the agent, so that every steps is documented, every steps is logged and traced, so that I can see if there's an error in step number 10, can a person debug and see what happened in step number 5 in order to find the root cause of the anomalies. So I think they're implementing this kind of risk-based approach and having a good observability, and lastly, having a good policy driven mechanism to monitor things rather than reviewing everything. Is one of the approaches.
Yeah, great points, Adrish. Dave, what are your thoughts on human in the loop?
So humans, I think, have moved from being an operator to more of a supervisor. And when I think about that, and I think about a bunch of agents that are doing operations, I don't think that's going to scale to have humans supervising those agents. I think you need to have agents. Yeah, so I hope you heard that it's from operational, so operation from being an operator to a supervisor. I think we'll see agents supervising other agents and using setting goals and KPIs and then measuring the results of those operations are going to be the real way to understand whether those agents are operating in the way that you thought.
Yep, excellent point. I'm glad we got to hear it. Girish, what are your thoughts on this question as well?
Yes, I want just to make a couple of pointers. I think it's really I look at it from a design principle perspective. We need to look at
Girish, once he regains audio. I want to go ahead and move to the next question, but Gabe's point actually leads in nicely to this next question, which is about governance and observability for autonomous agents. So governance, obviously, a hot topic across all aspects of AI right now, and how it impacts the traditional way that we think of data or information governance, and how it's different in a lot of ways when we introduce AI into the equation. So as we think about what it means when agents are acting autonomously, how does that impact what kind of tooling or practices we need in the context of observability and audit trails and control mechanisms when agents have the ability to act on their own and maybe are deploying themselves in ways that are leading to unexpected outcomes. So Antonio, why don't you start that?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about sort of autonomy increasing sort of the blast radius of bad decisions that agents may make, and a lot of that being based off of the overall integrity of the data that organizations are using, or that the agent in this case would be using to act on behalf of the human in the loop. So whether it be for regulation or its internal policy, we're seeing a lot more organizations starting to implement and adopt full traceability. And obviously, for a long time, we've had the opportunity to build lineage into our data governance workflows, but that's becoming more and more of an imperative for organizations. So, in this case, we want to be able to trace and understand why, and be explained, well, why an agent made a specific action. So, what data did the agent use? Was that data current and complete? Was it enriched with the right real world attributes that represent maybe the world around a specific decision? That's something that we focus on heavily from a spatial analytics perspective, or from a data enrichment perspective, is ensuring that agents have the right attributes so that they can make decisions. Just like you or I, we need to have context around a specific business decision. It may include something like something about a property, or about a demographic within a specific area, to be able to make some sort of decision. Well, the agent's going to be no different. It needs to have the metadata, it needs to have those additional attributes available to it to be able to make a well-informed action, just as you or I would. The same goes for the data itself from a governance perspective. It has to be understood by the agent so that it can properly use that data within some sort of action. So whether it be from traceability, from lineage, or those policies that I mentioned when we were talking about the human in the loop component, we kind of pair those with observability for real time to understand that the data freshness, was there some sort of quality drift, or some sort of completeness metric, or threshold that we're no longer meeting. So being able to govern the overall agentic system that you have is really kind of data governance under pressure. So data governance programs that we've seen for a long time are really being called upon now to execute a data strategy in a much different way.
Excellent points, Adrish.
Yeah, one of the things I'll mention is because our root in federated learning, we kind of went through some of these issues of complex governance. I'll give you an example. In most of the data that agents need is not in a single data warehouse. It could be in multiple places, multiple cloud, on-prem environment, or in a SaaS, etc. So we created a two-tiered governance approach. One is the approach that's kind of at the program level or the agent level, that understands some of the basic guardrails around what agent is supposed to do, what is going to look at. But then we created a second tier of governance where individual data owner can provide their own governance or own rules. For example, in some cases, some data owner might be okay with accessing certain columns, and another data owner may say, I don't want anybody to access like a medical images, for example. And so that could be a different approach that we need to support this kind of localized policies by agent. One is at the global level, but also at the data owner level. And then along with that, once you set this up, but also along with that, as other speaker mentioned, there's a comprehensive audit logging, data lineage. All these things now become really important, because all the data owner might be interested in the violations or any kind of anomalous activities in their environment. So I think the combination of this tiered approach of governance, along with the solid auditability and a review of anomalies, would be a very important patterns to implement.
Yeah, great points, Dave.
So agree with Adrish on that. I think that you need to secure your data at rest so that you can have confidence that regardless of what agent is getting access to whatever data corpus that it needs, that you're not exposing data to parties that shouldn't see that data. So you got to apply your data policies, your data at rest. At its source, if you really want to be confident to let your agents roam.
Great points, Dave. And Girish, I want to hear your answer to this question, and also I want to make sure you get a chance to finish that last question. I think the last thing we heard about was approaching it like design thinking in terms of human in the loop.
Yes. So can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I want to so a couple of things. So we're still talking about governance and observability, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's not just agentic AI. AI agents and agentic AI all are going to completely transform governance. I think I've talked about this previously. My view is that governance, like the traditional way we talk about data governance, security governance, it's going to all come together in form of some sort of an AI governance. That's what we are seeing from our customers. One, and because fundamentally it's all about provenance. Why did something happen? Show me why did it happen today? And there is not a whole lot of things you can do today, right? If an agent made a change to, let's say, the slots on BigQuery or credits on a Snowflake warehouse, why did that happen? Is it codified? And who approved that? And the logs for that? These are all exciting stages, and this needs to happen. So for me, I'm very bullish that we are finally going to see a convergence or collapsing of multiple governance like functions all in one, hopefully in the foreseeable future. So I think that's the opportunity here, no silos.
Yeah, excellent points. So I want to turn to what this actually looks like in practice. And, we talked about what agents are, what the role of humans is, how to govern those agents, but how do we actually, particularly in a large enterprise setting, actually integrate this into the workflow? What does this actually tangibly look like? And we see a lot of organizations that are already preemptively engaging in mass layoffs, or at least purporting to engage in layoffs due to AI. And a lot of that is on the hope that agents will be able to fill a lot of the roles that currently are filled by humans. So what does it actually look like to integrate those agents into workflows? What are some of the technical organizational challenges? And how do you see teams navigating things like legacy systems, legacy security policies, trust barriers, things that were built for another era that will have to be modernized if we have agents truly acting as FTEs basically across large enterprises? What does that look like, and what do these organizations need to be navigating? Girish, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Sure. So the integration challenge is real. I think we're just to make sure that was the integration related question, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just what does it take to actually integrate agents into the workflow, particularly in large
Right,
enterprises?
yeah. So what we are seeing is as follows. We briefly talked about human in the loop or AI in the loop. The integration challenges. I think I said I prefaced my introduction by saying I think the entire practice of data management is not quite ready yet. Uh, I know it's a bold thing to say because it's not a embedding AI in a piecemeal fashion is relatively easy, but the real hard part is the access, trust, and organizational lethargy and change. So for us, from our perspective, Revefi, we connect to the Snowflakes, Databricks, BigQuery, and we are up and running in a matter of minutes. Is for because our access model is very narrow, and we say, hey, we need an authorized user to give us access to metadata, and someone on the team who is authorized handles that part of it. So what we have done is, so essentially, instead of redoing or overhauling complete workflows or pipelines, we have figured a way in which embedding into the source and the data platforms, that way we bring in the relevant contextual metadata. So, and we ensure trust, because not only because of our platform compliance of SOC 2 type 2 HIPAA and all those things, but most importantly, bringing in only the relevant data in a read-only fashion. So for us, what we really find is data teams are owned to are used to doing things, deciding how to resize a warehouse, how do I allocate slots in the case of BigQuery. We can automatically resize it. Our agent can do that with human in the loop initially, and then without human in the loop. That's the challenge which our customers sometimes need to overcome, and it's all based on results. We give two options. First, you get comfortable, and then you integrate with existing workflows as opposed to completely redoing or blowing up your workflows. Back to you, Brian.
Yeah, great points. Shan?
Great points. And maybe I can make 3 points, one each from a technical system and organization design standpoint. I think from a technical standpoint, I think it's sort of becoming obvious to all of us, right? Which is we want to build these integrations, both with modern systems and legacy systems based on, standard protocols, right? Be it MCP or agent to agent or anything else that, evolves in the next, a few years. But I think that's going to be critical, right? Using standard protocols to integrate with systems. I think that is somewhat obvious. What I'd say is, two other maybe what is not necessarily obvious to everyone that I speak with. The first, from a system design standpoint, like I truly believe that the traditional systems of how we've governed and managed is not going to be able to scale, right? If the true potential of agentic AI has to be delivered. So it's going to be hypercritical to figure out how customers are going to be able to leverage agents to govern agents, right? Which is, if you think about it, the governance problem is itself ripe to be agentified, if that is a term that I can use, right? So figuring out while you build these core line of business agents that solve a specific problem, investing equally in developing your ability to use agentic AI to govern those agents is going to be a second system design aspect for everyone to consider. The third organizational design point that I would make is, many of us are familiar with how the site reliability engineering discipline evolved in Google, how the DevOps discipline evolved elsewhere. I think we are going to see the evolution of agent ops as a separate discipline, as a separate set of skill set and mindset that people need to have, where you have understanding of the technology, you have understanding of the process and policies involved. How do you collaborate with the rest of the organization, right? So I think those are the 3 points that I'll make in terms of integration, which is the first is standard protocols from a technical design standpoint. The second is agent governed agents as a system design standpoint, and then as an organizational design standpoint, I'd say thinking about agent ops as a separate discipline that brings together a bunch of different skill set that today might exist in an organization, but how do you bring together, how do you empower them? Those are the three things that I would say that spans technical to organizational design.
Yeah, great point. Dave?
Can you hear me okay, Brian?
Yes, and the video looks much better, so I think you're good now.
Okay, great. Yeah, the only point I'll make, in addition to what everybody else said, is it's important to have a good data foundation, of course, and you got to start there. And you have to have central meeting. If you don't have central meeting, it doesn't matter how many agents you have roaming around. They're going to get answers wrong, and they're going to get answers wrong confidently. And that's something that will not work and not scale. So start with a good data foundation, start with a good meeting layer, a good business context layer to let those agents work with confidence.
Okay, great points, Dave. Antonio?
I think Dave and I are on one mind on this. It really starts with your data that you have within your organization. I think Adrish had mentioned earlier just how often organizations are storing their data across various platforms. That's something that we are seeing from a technical challenge for organizations that are trying to operationalize AI in general, but then also now with agentic AI, most folks are either multi-cloud or multi-data platform, and in many cases are still using some of the traditional or legacy systems. I mean, you go and look at IBM's earnings report from last year and tell me that the mainframe is dead, right? It is something that is still a huge part of the data landscape for organizations. And so data is across SAP, IBM, obviously all the hyperscalers and the data platforms that you see. So the actual ecosystem that organizations that we're supporting and that we're seeing in the marketplace is quite vast, and it's challenging to be able to consistently manage data across all of those systems. And it's those systems that these agents are going to be relying on to be able to act on behalf of those humans within the organization. So ensuring that there's access, that the data is enriched, it's fresh, it's purpose shaped for whatever your agents are meant to go off and do. That's sort of the data foundation front, ensuring that you have high integrity information that your agentic initiatives can pull from. And then the other piece is more from an organizational and cultural perspective, and that's ensuring that there are those layers of trust, that there is literacy. Obviously, there's still data literacy challenges that we see a lot of organizations having before we even get to an AI and an agentic AI perspective. So bringing those folks along within the organization so they can learn and work alongside of these agents, which I guess that increasingly we're all going to be expected to do in our day-to-day work. So building a kind of a cultural imperative too around working alongside of AI agents for any number of different purposes. I think continuing to reinforce the kind of change management that's going to go along with this, ensuring that you're stewarding your organization along, is going to be a huge inflection point that we'll probably see coming here shortly.
Fair points. Adrish?
Yeah, well, I think we're completely aligned here in terms of what we need to do. Like I did mention previously, like data modeling, data cataloging, documentation, API design will become like a first-class skill. If anybody's losing job in software engineering, this is a great career in my mind, because without good documentation around your ontologies, around your data model, agent cannot operate. For example, we have simple things like, let's say there's a field called account status. What account status really mean to me versus organization B, organization C, they could be different. Somebody may say active is the live customer. Somebody may say live as a live customer. There's a lot of different ways you can create your terminologies and ontologies within organizations. And a lot of in healthcare, there is actually significant research done to create this kind of code. Like there's a 70,000 code for disease. There's 10,000 code for codifying a medication names. A lot of the things are done in a healthcare, in a public space, but most of the industries don't have this kind of ontologies in a public space. These are kind of needs to be developed as a part of organization or cross-organization basis. So having this kind of semantic definitions of the term and documentation around it so that agent can understand it is become very critical in terms of technical things. And the second thing I'll mention is previously say that you really have to figure out what is an agent problem versus what problem can be solved just by prompting, or problem that could be solved by using a predefined workflow like ETL. So don't call every project an agent project, but really define what you can delegate as a team to an agent, and then figure out this guardrail, monitoring, etc., so that not every project in an organization becomes an agent and a project. All the other technologies are also important. Third thing I would say that adoption of the standards are really important, and this is one of the reasons we are adopting MCPs such faster space, because that's the only way for us to make the data, which is a proprietary, private, available to an LLM, and also for us to connect to an LLM ecosystem much more faster. I think the MCP is really important for us to look into and have everybody adopt that. And also there's other protocols like, feature everything will become like a multi-agent. It's not possible that for one organization to develop all the agents needs to interoperate with other agents like A2A protocol, etc. will become in process. Having this standardization, interoperability is a key to our ecosystem success.
Excellent points. We've got time for probably our lightning round now. So I think you can take a moment to answer this in one phrase or a couple. What do you think is the single most important mindset shift that teams need to make when moving from our current world of more reactive AI systems to agentic systems across large enterprises? So we'll start with Adrish.
Yeah, I would say that bottleneck for agentic AI is not intelligence. We already have a lot of good intelligence tools. It's about bringing the agent to the data with all the guardrails and auditability and security.
Dave?
Yeah, along with Adrish, like if you don't trust your data, it's game over. So I always say, do you trust your data for BI, for business intelligence? If your answer is a little wishy-washy, then you can't unleash agents on a non-trusted data foundation. The velocity that can be created through agents is so much more than the velocity that can be created by humans using business intelligence. So I think that's a really good litmus test. Do you trust your data?
Very good point, Girish.
Yeah, so my view is stop developing 3-5-year AI plans and strategies. In 3 months, everything is going to change. It's not only our colleagues from Google and others, the pace at which things are happening. So don't build 3-year, 5-year plans. It'll get end of life or useless by the time in another 3 minutes, right? So the question is, stop the overthinking and overcome the friction. Just start doing things. What are you going to delegate to AI today? That should be top of mind for everyone. It's not about content. It's not about experimentation. It's about responsible ROI from your AI systems today.
Great perspective, Shan.
Yeah, I'll leave the audience with 2 quick things, right? So the first is, figure out how you're going to unlock unstructured data that might exist in your organization, be it documents, PDFs, images, videos, etc. Basically unstructured data. The second point that I'll make is start thinking about agent ops as a separate discipline. I think both these are going to be critical for you to be able to deliver true value with agentic AI systems. With that, I'll also thank you for the opportunity for everyone.
Thanks, Shan. Antonio, we'll finish up with you.
I'm going to be a little redundant here with what we've been talking about thus far, but I think it is one of the most important pieces, and that's the agentic AI is only going to amplify whatever that data foundation is that you have. And so if it's a poor foundation, you're going to amplify and accelerate that same poor outcome that would come from those agents.
Absolutely. Well, enjoyed the discussion today. All of you had great perspectives, so thank you very much for your time and input. So I want to say a special thank you, of course, to all the panelists as well as to our sponsors. Precisely, Revefi, Google Cloud, AtScale, Rhino Federated Computing, B2B Business, and SAP. And if you missed any of this webinar and like to rewatch anything, you can refresh this page just after the webinar concludes, and you'll be able to watch the recording. And we also will send out the recording on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So thank you again to all of our speakers and our sponsors, and thank you again to all of you being with us today. See you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.